And welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am joined today by our number 3 member of the Tony Vitellis hate rankings here in the one and only Matt Mlodzinski, and our Wisconsin CBB Review contributor, Evan Epstein. And we are here with another Game Picks episode for Wisconsin Marquette game of the week. That's why we have the Wisconsin guy, Evan, on the show, and we'll be picking 9 other games as well. Guys, before we get started, how we doing?
Doing pretty well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, Evan. And Dan, I need to talk about the Tony Vitellis hate rankings real quick because Tony actually loves me. That is all out of love. And look, I'm trying to spread some Christmas cheer, some holiday cheer. So I know that a lot of people hate on Tony. That's probably why he feels that way. But Tony, if you're listening, if you're watching, it's all love between us, man. It's all good. I understand the hate ranking.
I'll be honest, and we'll get into it in a second. I just want to say, like, I used to be a Tony Vitellis hater. Like, I used to think that his content was like a little bit off-putting, but no, that man is hilarious. For those of you that don't know, he's just the epitome of college basketball burner, sarcastic Twitter. So definitely give him a follow. But let's get started. Let's get into this slate of games we have this weekend. Starting with our game of the week, Wisconsin at Marquette. Both teams have recently taken their first loss of the year, actually, this past week. It was Wisconsin losing to Michigan this past Tuesday. It was Marquette losing to Iowa State on Wednesday, but a rivalry game, a game that for college basketball fans that I guess don't care about football too much, will have plenty of eyebrows on. But what's our initial insight? We'll start with our guest, Evan, who is the Wisconsin guy. What are you feeling from the Badgers' perspective here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the game against Michigan, it came as no surprise. I mean, Michigan has 2 big 7-footers inside and Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, but that's not the problem because Wisconsin has both Steven Krell and Nolan Winter who size up at 7 feet. But Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden just move much better than Wisconsin's big man. Vlad Golden ended with 24 points, and they really just dominated the entire game. But I don't think Wisconsin's necessarily going to have that problem with Marquette. Marquette, a team, their tallest player clocks in at 6'11". They're really a forward-heavy team. They only play about 4 guards. I think Wisconsin stacks up pretty well. I think you're going to see John Tonje have another great performance. But if Wisconsin wants to go and win this one on the road, it can't just be John Tonje. They're going to need one of their role players like John Blackwell or Max Klesmit to step up and have a really big game.
That's a good point. I mean, look, Evan, I think that Wisconsin's a great basketball team, right? And clearly they were one of the teams preseason that we didn't look at Wisconsin in the right way. And I feel like myself too, I was harsh on Wisconsin in the offseason. I was looking at last year, the Badgers that did not live up to the preseason expectations, seemed like they had a lot of senior leaders on that team, and for all intents and purposes really didn't reach the ceiling that I thought they might have been able to. Well, this year, they're blowing it out of the water so far. But I will say, I'm a Big East guy. I see what Marquette just did against Iowa State. That is a tough place to play. I think that Shaka Smart gets this group ready to play, and I think that Marquette defends home against a very good Wisconsin team. But the way that I think Marquette gets done, they're going to have to play physical, right? Because I think that Wisconsin is going to score the basketball. This is going to be a higher scoring game than I think people might be used to in a Wisconsin-Marquette matchup. And I think that Marquette's going to have to play very physical. They're not going to be able to just rely on their three-point shooting on the way that they're able to get open buckets. I think that they're going to really have to turn this game into a bit of a dogfight.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys could find any Vegas line on this game yet. I haven't seen anything yet. I'm curious as to more the over-under than anything because I'm sure the spread will be pretty close to a pick 'em. But as far as this game is concerned, I mean, first off with Wisconsin, they're not very favored. But you got it there, Matt?
I don't have it, no.
Okay. I thought you were about to say so. Anyway, I think Wisconsin, they're not really favored by the metrics in the same sense that we kind of felt weary on them going into the season. They're 36th in KenPom, 39th in Torvik. Marquette is a lot more favored. And I think the reason Wisconsin is just not viewed that way, they haven't really beaten anybody phenomenal. No, the Arizona win was considered very like favorably looked upon when it happened. However, Arizona has really dropped off the cliff. So, they have solid wins. They're 8-1. Marquette as well. Think about Marquette. They shoot a lot of threes, but it's a little bit the distribution of who's taking the shots is kind of questionable to me. David Joplin has taken by far the most 3-point shots on the team, but I don't think he's at all their best shooter. So that's a little interesting fact I found when I researched Marquette. I think, though, like Matt said, I'm going to go with Marquette. I think Wisconsin's somewhat vulnerable inside. I mean, Pitt abused them around the rim. I watched that game. Pitt was 18 for 20 around the rim. Even UT Rio Grande Valley had some success around the rim when they nearly upset Wisconsin. I think it's a big day for Cam Jones, and he puts them just a little bit over the top. So I'll go Marquette. Matt, you went Marquette. Evan, I'm assuming it's a Wisconsin pick from you officially.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Wisconsin here, but I think the point you make around the rim is interesting. Wisconsin, you have Crowell and Winter's been the most improved player on this team by far. But right now you have a struggling Steven Crowell that's kind of taken the 5 spot on the offense. And I think a lot of people want to see Nolan Winter come into his own as the starting center. And I think maybe if Wisconsin plays a little bit smaller, that's going to eliminate some of the issues they had, like you mentioned, against UT Rio Grande Valley. Now, will they make those adjustments in this game? I'm not quite sure. As you said, I got to go with Wisconsin here, but I mean, this one's going to come down to the final 2 minutes.
All right, let's go to some of our other games. So starting Saturday afternoon, we'll back up a little bit. At noon, you got a mid-major matchup. For those of you that are watching this live at the time, I respect it. And you'll see a good game. Princeton against Furman, 2 of the better mid-majors. We'll go Matt to Evan to me for the game picks. So, Matt, we'll start with you.
Look, Furman's defense has been pretty good, except when they play a little bit of a more talented team, right? They've held a lot of teams under 60 points, around 70 points or so. Belmont, they gave up 74. Kansas, they gave up 86. I think that with Xavion Lee and Princeton, you just have a really good guard. Again, first triple-double in program history. Not sure what Furman's going to be able to do against him. And you see a Princeton team that's coming off that win over St. Joseph's. I think they're starting to find their way a little bit. Now it's 7-3 on the year. Chance for another quality win before Ivy League play here. I've got the Tigers.
All right, Matt. Well, I'm going to take Furman in this one. Furman starting 7-0, and then they got blown out by number 1 Kansas. But here's the thing. I think an experience against that Kansas team, even if you get blown out, it's going to show them what they need to work on. Both of these teams are big 3-point shooting teams, both making over 11 3-pointers per game. It's going to be a fun one to watch for basketball fans, but you got to look at PJ Smith Jr. averaging 17.4 points per game, and he's shooting it at a clip of over 50% from 3-point land, 30 for 58 on the season. I'm going to take Furman at home in this one.
Yeah, that's a reasonable pick. It is going to be a 3-point shooting like Chuck Fest. I think Furman, you look at their defensive numbers, they defended well, like 25%. However, they've kind of played pretty bad teams outside of Kansas, I guess. But I'm going to take Princeton in this game. I had to throw an ACC game on here. I wasn't sure which one, but I decided on the rivalry game between the two newest members of the Atlantic Coast Conference, and Stanford and Cal. What are you thinking, Matt?
Look, Stanford's best win on the season is at Santa Clara by 2, which isn't terrible. Cal won at USC by 5. Other than that, neither team really has any strong wins, but they do have a common opponent, and that's Cal Poly. Stanford lost that game by 7. Cal won by 18. This game is at Cal. I think that makes it an easy pick for me to go with the Golden Bears.
Yeah, Matt, I'm with you here. And I think Stanford's a 3-headed monster here. Maxime Reynaud, Jalen Blakes, and Oziah Sellers. 52 points per game out of 79 points per game for Stanford. And I think Cal's going to be able to try and really key in on Reynaud, who's tied for 9th in points per game in the NCAA. Like you said, I just think at home, this is going to be one where Cal takes care of business.
Yep, Cal clean sweep across the board. I kind of mentioned the same things. The bad loss by Stanford to Cal Poly. Stanford has good players. They're not a good team. I'm going to go with Cal. Next up, we got Butler at Houston. Houston ranked 17th now. This is honestly a game worth picking, in my opinion, and not a clear-cut Houston win, but I'm curious if you guys agree.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that because, or I would say that, excuse me, because Houston, they've definitely struggled this season. Butler's been a little bit of a surprise in the Big East, but even though Butler has wins over SMU, Northwestern, and Mississippi State, which is probably the most impressive of those bunch, they've yet to play a true road game this season. And I feel like Houston knows that, look, you're going to get a lot of great opportunities in the Big 12, but you got to get at least one non-conference win that's going to help your case come tournament time. This is a chance to pick up a decent resume win, not a great one, but a decent one, and I think Houston gets it done.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Houston here as well. The two numbers I look at for this one, it's turnover margin, and Butler has struggled to take care of the basketball. Negative 6.1 turnover margin, and right on the flip side, Houston with a plus 6.1 turnover margin. I think Houston really needs a win here. Their losses come against Auburn, Alabama, San Diego State. That's why they're still in the top 25, but they're not going to be in the top 25 if they lose this one. Houston picks up a much needed win.
Agreed. I like Butler. I know they've gotten some good wins so far. I think what they've done is so unsustainable. They've gotten astronomically hot from 3-point land at the right time, and their opponents have similarly gone astronomically cold from 3-point land at the right time. The turnover margin's a key in this one. I don't see it sustaining, so I'm going to go with Houston as well. I think they kind of have a comfortable win here, but I think the game was worth picking for sure. Moving on, this one, it's a shame this one's on conference championship for football Saturday night, because it's a phenomenal game. This is one of the better games so far this year, and that's saying a lot because we've had a lot of good games. But Gonzaga against Kentucky, technically at a neutral site in Seattle, but basically a Gonzaga home game. What are your thoughts?
I just look at both teams and how similar they are, right? Both just great playmaking. They're able to dish out assists and really move the basketball. They're both able to rebound well. They can score well. They're both averaging over 90 points per game. I mean, Gonzaga and Kentucky, this is a matchup that we could see later on late in March, right, in the Elite Eight or something like that. But right now, in December, I feel like Kentucky has a little bit more to figure out, and Gonzaga's defense has been pretty impressive against some great teams, holding Baylor to 63, holding San Diego State to 67. They have that loss to West Virginia, but since then, they've had a couple of double-digit wins. They've played a tough schedule. They're going to be ready for Kentucky. This is not going to be a case where Gonzaga is not ready to face a really good team. They're in Seattle. Everything's lining up for a Gonzaga win, but it's going to be close. This is going to be a great game.
Yeah, Matt, and you say Gonzaga's ready. They're always ready early in the season because they know their non-conference matchups are going to be their biggest games of the year before they get into conference play, and you have St. Mary's, but it's obviously not going to be as difficult of a matchup for Gonzaga. So, like you said, I think they're ready going into this game. I think they're going to try and play bully ball a little bit down low. They make over 18 free throws per game, get to the line a lot. Great rebounding margin, plus 10. I think they win this one down in the paint.
Yeah, I'm not only down the paint. I think Gonzaga just has an overall edge, from a lot of different facets. They don't have that superstar, well-known guy like your Jalen Suggs or your Drew Timme, who was there for 9 years, but they don't have many weaknesses. They do everything at least to a good degree. You know what I mean? I think when they lost to West Virginia in overtime, it was because of Javon Small putting up 31 points. I don't see anybody on Kentucky being the ones to put up 31 points and having that kind of effort. I think Gonzaga wins this game for those reasons. Next up, we've got Maryland and Purdue. Is this moving on to so Sunday, noon tip-off, and Purdue still ranked number 8 after that loss to Penn State. Obviously, they're not a true top 10 team anymore, but what are we thinking here?
I think Purdue drops another one. And I get that it's a tough place to play, but look, without a true big man, which is weird to see for Purdue, right? We just don't know who's going to lead this team inside anymore. You got Trey Kaufman-Renn, but I don't think that holds nearly close to holds Julian Reese and Derek Queen, right? Derek Queen might just be the best freshman in college basketball, in my opinion.
Wow.
I mean, he's been dominant inside, dominant. And I know that is probably a bit of a take, but I'm all in on Maryland. I am all in on Maryland. Kevin Willard has had a resurgence where he's not afraid to shoot the three. I saw that on a podcast the other day where he says a quick three is better than a turnover. I think Maryland wins this game and officially puts themselves on the map.
Man, I thought I was gonna be going out there taking Maryland in this one too, but you beat me to it, Matt. Here's the thing: Purdue, you might say they got upset by Penn State, but Penn State was a 1.5 favorite in that game, and there's a reason. Like you said, they don't have a big man. Daniel Jacobson was supposed to come in and fill that gap for Zach Edey, but the 7'4" freshman, he broke his leg in one of the first games of the season, and that's really killed them. They have no response for Derek Queen because they don't have a true center on their roster. So I'm agreeing with you. I think Maryland's going to pick up a win on the road.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree on the take of him being the best freshman. However, like this freshman group has just like in many years, he might be like a top 3, top 1 even freshman. I just think this freshman class is just so loaded. But either way, I'm going Maryland as well, actually. I did write that down. I have been planning on taking Maryland all along. I was not expecting a clean Maryland sweep here, but I think the formula is really out there to beat Purdue, right? You apply a ton of ball pressure on their guards, you press a little bit, and you make them uncomfortable. And Maryland is 10th in the country in turnover defense. I think they have the formula to beat Purdue. I think certain teams in the Big Ten will, certain teams won't. And I think Maryland is one of the teams that do. So I think Maryland will win this game. Now we got another kind of a similar sort of sentiment here where a really good team who just took a loss and is thinking, maybe they're not as good as we thought. That is Kansas, who just got smoked by Creighton. They're playing at Missouri. Are we thinking the same thing here? Are we thinking Kansas is going to fall once again?
I think Kansas gets it done, but Missouri has a track record in the past when they used to be in the Big 12 of beating Kansas here and there. They have a team that can score the basketball this year. They look like they can shoot the 3 a little bit. An improved Missouri team. They're not going to go 0-18 in the SEC this season, I'll tell you that. I also just don't know if they have what it takes to get it done. I think Kansas, coming off the loss, is going to be ready. Bill Self prepares his teams like no other, especially in that situation. But this is going to be a closer game. I think it's going to be easy to look at this game and think that Kansas is going to win by 15 points. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 2-3 possession game coming out of the under 4 timeout. I think Kansas escapes, though.
Yeah, I'm going to take Kansas as well here. My problem with Missouri is just the quality of opponent that they've played. Yeah. Memphis in game 1 is great, but that's all the way back at the start of November. They lost that game by 8 points. I'm not really going to count Cal as a quality opponent. It was a nice win in their last game, but yeah, Kansas is going to come back strong from this. I think Hunter Dickinson's going to have a big night. He was held to just 6 points in that really ugly loss against Creighton. I mean, Kansas shooting just 35% from the field. I think this is going to be a nice response here from the Jayhawks.
I guess we've been a little boring because I'm going to continue with Kansas. Clean sweep across the board again. I don't think they drop 2 straight. I'll be real. I do worry about Kansas's 3-point shooting. Thought it would improve this year. It's been another problem, and that's kind of been the Achilles heel for that program. They do everything else really well, but not a great shooting team, shooting like low 30s, I think, as far as percentage this year. So something to keep an eye out for, but I think they do what they typically do well with their identity, and they win this game. They're just a better team. That's simply how I'm going to put it. We got another in-state matchup coming up next. We got in the mid-afternoon time slot, number 22 Texas A&M going to Texas Tech.
Look, there's a lot of I'm going back and forth with this game a ton, and I want to look at the St. Joseph's game because I feel like this is maybe a similar thing that you can look at, where Eric Reynolds destroyed Texas Tech, and that got St. Joseph's, the win there. And you look at what Wade Taylor can do, and it's like, all right, is this the same case? Is Texas Tech going to be able to stop a pure scoring guard? I think they do this time because I think that probably that game woke them up a little bit. Texas Tech is a physical team. They can get out in transition when they need to. They've got JT Toppin. They're at home. Another close one, I've got the Red Raiders.
All right, well, we're finally going away from our clean sweep here because I'm taking Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M has a couple of quality wins this year over Ohio State and Creighton. I don't think it's just going to be Wade Taylor. I think they're going to really have to go to their role players in this one in terms of Zurich Phelps and Henry Coleman. But that loss against St. Joseph's is just really alarming to me. I know it was just a 1-point game, but I think this is a Texas A&M team that, because they've already faced those blue bloods like Ohio State and Creighton, they're going to be ready to play well on the road.
I'm going A&M as well. I don't think it's necessarily because of the Texas Tech St. Joseph's loss. Like, St. Joe's is the kind of team with their talent, their two-headed backcourt, and then Rasheer Fleming in the front court. Like, that's a team that when they're on, they could beat a lot of very good teams. So that doesn't concern me that much. I just think in this specific battle of A&M and Tech, which the way I view it, it's skill versus toughness, skill versus physicality. Like, these two programs couldn't have more opposite identities. And I think in this case, on the road, it's a gutsy win for the Aggies. So not sure too much what to make of that game, but that's my initial thoughts on that. Next up, we've got the game. I think this was I want to say this was played last year in MSG. I'm not positive. It was, yeah. UConn against Texas. This time at Texas, right? And this one at 5:00 on Sunday.
Look, I think point number one I have to make is if Alex Caravan can't play in this game, then all of a sudden Texas has a huge advantage. Obviously, UConn able to get the win at home, at Gampel without Caravan over Baylor. A little bit different when you're in Austin at Texas, a Texas team that has, ever since their loss to Ohio State to open the season, defense has been tremendous. I mean, they have shut teams down, 59 points in their last time out at NC State. Excuse me. I'm also just like contractually obligated to not pick UConn, so I pretty much have to go with the Longhorns here.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Longhorns as well. I mean, UConn losing all three Maui Invitational games, Memphis and Colorado was close, and then they looked absolutely lost against Dayton. They came back with a win over Baylor, but Trey Johnson, we talked about just how good this freshman class is. He's another piece of it, almost 21 points per game. Really impressed in their win over NC State. And I think this is a game where UConn, they lost a lot of players last year. I think the expectations coming into this season for them were a little bit too high. And I think they're going to slip again here and they're going to fall out of the top 25.
Yeah, the fact that they are still in the top 25 is just horrible, in my opinion. Like, there's no reason UConn should be ranked. They weren't ranked in our CBB poll, I don't believe. They weren't ranked in pretty much any reputable poll. So the AP poll, just saying. But I'm going to go UConn. I'm going to go against you too. I think UConn figured out a little bit of something in the Baylor game that they were lacking in the Maui Invitational. Specifically defensively, they were a lot better against Baylor, who's a team that could lay up the scoreboard. They were horrible defensively in the Maui Invitational. So many miscues, miscommunications, lost guys in transition, etc. They also finally figured out a little bit of bench production offensively. Like, Aiden Mahaney is finally alive. He had 9 points on 3 of 4 shootings, so maybe that could be somebody that comes alive a little bit. So I'm going to go UConn, but again, I'm not in love with this UConn team. I'm just not in love with this Texas team either. I think UConn wins on the road. And then we got our late night West Coast game, or I guess not late night necessarily, but 6:00 Sunday night, UCLA at the undefeated 12th team in the nation, Oregon Ducks.
I think we need to put Oregon on upset alert. I'll be honest. They've kind of played some close games. They've struggled. They've had some games where they've been down in the first half, had to come back in the second half. You look at UCLA, 6th best team in the country as far as opponent field goal percentage, holding their opponents to 36% from the field, holding their opponents to 27% from three-point range, an Oregon team that also has not shot the ball overly well from three. We know that Jackson Shelstead can get hot. I like this Oregon team, but I think that UCLA is going to go in there and pull off the upset. This wasn't my original pick. I'm changing it last minute, and I'm going with the Bruins.
Well, I'm going with the Ducks. I think Oregon's had a fantastic start to the season. I was shocked when they took down number 9 Alabama. But here's the thing. Jackson Shelstad has actually been pretty quiet early on this season, and he's supposed to be their star player. He had just 6 points in that game against Alabama, but now he had 24 points in the most recent game against USC. Nate Biddle has stepped up in a big way. And I think if this team is 9-0 right now, and Jackson Shellstad has really been a shell of his former self, if he steps up this year, this Ducks team is going to be scary. I think they're going to be undefeated going all the way into the new year if you just look at their next 4 games coming up, which does mean that I'm going to take Oregon in this one.
Yeah, I'm curious. Do you have their next 4 games here? I got it right here. So we've got UCLA, yeah, Stephen F. Austin, Stanford, Weber State. Yeah, I agree. They'll be undefeated going into the new year. I'm going to go Oregon. I totally agree on that sentiment. Like, Shellstad has so much more room to reach his peak that we've already seen in his freshman year. He's kind of gotten off to a somewhat slow start his sophomore year. UCLA is a metric darling. The metrics love their defense. I still love them. I love Mick Cronin, but I like Oregon a little more. Oregon's actually first in the resume metric for per Torvik in wins above bubble. Oregon is number 1 in the country. They have the best body of work so far. So I think there's something to be said about that. I'm going Ducks. That will do it for today's edition of the CB Review Studio podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our channel here at CB Review. Be sure to follow us on the socials. You could follow us on CB Review everywhere, or you could follow us on our personals, as you could see on the screen. Once again, appreciate everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and take care.